Hi, I think I have some real bangers for you today as 1999 keeps delivering awesome experiences in heaps. So, let's check them out. Commandos Beyond the Call of Duty is a standalone expansion pack to the original Commandos Behind Enemy Lines, and henceforth basically the same game, playing identically, only improved a little. But a little in certain circumstances may be a lot, and such is the case here too, but we'll get to that later on. So it's a top-down real-time tactics stealth combat game set in Europe during Second World War. It is composed out of 8 large and very demanding missions taking place in different locations around occupied continent. And it's so tough in fact that the hardest missions in the first game seem like a child's play compared to these, even played on the easiest difficulty. Other than support for higher resolutions and better looking textures, Beyond the Call of Duty is filled with new small features. 6 of our original commandos are back, but are now complemented in some missions by 2 other controllable characters, who have their own unique skills and quirks: Yugoslav partisan Dragja Skobje and Ukrainian spy Natasha. First game's team got a little extra love too, now being able to silently, even if only temporarily, knock out the enemies and cuff them then too. Spy can steal enemy uniforms and use them as disguise, infiltrating enemy operations even better than ever before. And all of them can use stones and cigarette packs as distractions now too, which alone opens up most of the missions to many more tactical approaches than ever before. You can also keep enemy guards at gunpoint and have them make your bidding, and they will, for the fear of being shot, for as long as you keep them in your sight. As soon as you look away though, they will run away and raise alarm. But all that is barely a few small changes, so how could they influence the gameplay dramatically, you may wonder? Well, same as in the first game, all missions have numerous objectives that require completing while keeping your soldiers alive. But unlike the first Commandos, the maps are overflowing with the enemies and they seem to be covering every part of them you could think of, guarding them, watching for any sign of movement like a hawk. Or, well, hawks, as there's many of them actually. Utilizing all of these new mechanics is a must each and every step of the way through all 8 of the missions. So, you'll be throwing them stones around all the time to lead the baddies away and create few inches wide passages for just a few seconds just to move further and further. Additionally, there are no useless commandos in any of the missions and each of them will have to participate in them, using their own specialties in some manner to complete them. I have a love-hate relationship with Commandos games, as I enjoy playing them immensely, as I like the idea of having to figure out use cases for different unit skills to complete particular objectives and tactical requirements that are needed to do so. In the same time, I hate losing and repeating the same thing numerous times in a row, each time moving just a little bit ahead. It's annoying to me. But I know that I'm in the minority, and Beyond the Call of Duty was a worthy successor to the first game and a great challenge for those who love to plan things out to the last second in detail and then follow through on that plan, seeing their hard work pay out. It's a must play. Redline is a spiritual successor to Atari Lynx's Battle Wheels game and a first-person perspective shooter/car combat game, mixed into one in a seamless and fun way. In fact, you can enter and exit vehicles at any time during combat whenever you see fit, and for any reason, be it tactical, survival, or for shits and giggles. For a pee, perhaps. Redline takes place in the year 2066, long after the Earth was devastated in a nuclear war, and is now a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Well, nightmare to some, as the survivors split into factions, insiders and outsiders, with first living in the comfort and safety of huge domes, keeping to themselves and enjoying their privileged post-corpo lives as if nothing had ever happened. Outsiders, however, as the name implies, survive outside of those heavenly domes and have to fight for every last scrap, resource or a spare part as if it was the last one on Earth. They tend to organize themselves in gangs for safety and to fight for control. Control of what, you may wonder, since everything's rather rundown? Of anything, my dear viewer. Cause if there's nothing, then anything, whatever it may be, and however low quality it is worth so much more than the literal nothing. I remember once having to live on a constant overdraft mixed with credit card debt, juggling both to sustain myself for a few years. It was not fun. And once I managed to get out of that pickle, repay it all, and got my first proverbial buck, it felt like $1 million. And that's how something, even a little, is more than nothing. I also spent that buck on a real jar of pickles, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, you play as a sole survivor of a Red Sixers attack on your hometown of Stadium City. Now, Sixers are crazed and deadly cannibals that lay destruction to the very little that's left in the Redline's world. I mean, all gangs suck in one way or another, but they are something else, a pure evil, like my boss's wife. Anyway, being the only to witness their perverse and bloody rituals and death and destruction of everything you held dear, you vowed revenge and joined one of the smaller and less inhuman gangs, the Company. to support them in their efforts, waiting for a chance to strike at the Red Sixers. As I mentioned initially, Redline is a mixture of a first-person shooter and a car combat game, so you'll spend as much time behind the wheel shooting the enemies doing wheelies as you do on foot exploring various buildings and hunting bodies around narrow corridors. It's worth noting that when you're on foot, you can be driven over, and you can do the same to the enemies when you're in the car, so I suppose it's fair. Redline is composed out of 12 increasingly more demanding missions that will take you all around the wasteland of a post-nuclear world to places like Stadium City, Templar strongholds and even infamous Area 51. So, if you like shooting, driving and dystopian themes, it's all of these three rolled into one and presented in a rather enjoyable package, even if its replayability, at least in my opinion, is questionable. Gabriel Knight 3 Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned is a third game in a series of point-and-click adventure games and the first made entirely in 3D, including all characters, which was a huge step up and a personal disappointment of mine on some superficial level. I just really like those campy, omnipresent FMV sequences from previous games, which are not here anymore. On the flip side, the game world is much more interesting than previously, filled with more puzzles and offers extended exploration than ever before, which perhaps did not make up for the change in the presentation entirely, but made it less disappointing to me. Especially that you could finally really get lost in the locales, scouting their every nook and cranny in detail. Now, all that said, just to make things clear, the game is fantastic, and the change in the presentation is an issue on my side only. Once again, you play as Gabriel Knight, a former bookstore owner and now a Schattenjäger, so a shadow hunter, and his lovely assistant Miss Grace Nakimura, alternating between the two. This time, however, the story is not set in New Orleans or Germany, but in Rennes-le-Château, a quiet town in southern France. As in most adventure games, Gabriel Knight 3-2 is rather linear, and offers little in terms of variety in subsequent playthroughs. But it is so well written, so captivating and deep that you'll no doubt want to replay it years after completing it first. The story starts off as a case of a kidnapped infant, but soon becomes a more dark and nefarious tale of mystery involving vampires, Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, Jesus and dark forces, supernatural beings pulling strings behind the stage and controlling the events in the small town. The game is split into several chapters covering a period of 3 days and sees both of our heroes investigating numerous locations, gathering information and evidence, and conversing with various characters. As you play and progress, new locations will be unlocked, and some of your actions can also cause changes in other areas than the one that you're in at the moment, which is always indicated with the sound of a ticking clock, letting you know to review mentally what you've learned and move to the area where the change may have occurred. Questioning of characters is rather extensive and based on series of context-related verb topics, focusing on asking about places, objects, the person themselves, and something they may know and may be relevant to your investigation but not covered by the earlier 3. Sadly, the conversations are not recorded anywhere, so you either gotta be careful listening to them not to miss any important detail or note things down. While familiarity with prior games is not de facto necessary to play the third one, it's no doubt helpful, as otherwise some subtle comments and retorts may sound odd and out of place, as they may reference protagonist's history. All that said, Gabriel Knight 3 is an excellent follow-up, incredible game in its own right, and a proof that a high standard in storytelling, literate and mature and thought-provoking idea may be as fun to get lost in as some of those action-packed shooters are, if not more. Imperialism II, The Age of Exploration is a multiplayer turn-based forex strategy and an improved version of the original title. It takes place between 1500 and 1850 and sees you exploiting the New World for power and gains, all to turn your European country into a sprawling, powerful and wealthy empire. And since we're on the Europe, that's precisely where you start the game, as unlike the first Imperialism, New World is not uncovered and has to be explored and studied first. And it's worth to do that, as it has resources not found on the old continent, namely spices, silver, gold, gems and diamonds, and luxuries of sugarcane, tobacco and fur, which are all crucial in your productivity when processed and made into luxury items. Interestingly enough, the victory condition in Imperialism II has nothing to do with the New World and is achieved by having a control over more than half of all countries in Europe. It can be done either with use of military or diplomatically. That said, while the New World takes no direct part in winning, victory without it and its resources is unlikely, if not impossible. While combat is very important in Imperialism II, it kinda takes a backseat a little and the game focuses on political and economic pieces of the strategy more. So stuff like worker and terrain productivity, labor and resource allocation and logistics. And all of these are key factors in your growth and victory, and they make up a huge chunk of the game's management part. So, every unit, be it military, ship or worker, has to be fed every turn, and depending on the luxuries available, a worker's productivity is affected. And even the most basic luxury of refined sugar, when consumed by a worker, allows him to work 4 times as efficient than it would have without it. The better the luxury consumable, the more productive he will be. All units are built based on combination of different in kind and number semi-processed raw materials. So to build a ship of the line, for instance, you have to have appropriate number of timber, tin ore, copper ore and wool. Then move it to where it will be processed into lumber, bronze, fabric and a worker, and then combine them all into a finished unit. It takes time, but is more realistic, and when you learn how it all relates with each other, it becomes not only logical, but also a very enjoyable loop to play around with. There's plenty of micromanagement involved in it all, is what I'm saying. So if that's not something you enjoy, you may want to skip Imperialism II. Still, building a strong and self-sufficient economy that's supported with strong labor force and a decent army is how you ultimately win the game. And since we're on a winning, whether you want to or not, combat will happen from time to time and will require you to carefully and smartly use all of your units, from cavalry to artillery, as they're easy to beat when facing units they're vulnerable to. So, using their strengths and protecting their weaknesses is a must. Fun and engaging mechanics and excellent and tough-as-nails AI makes Imperialism II a treat to any and all fans of historically themed strategies, and especially those set in the titular Age of Exploration. Test Drive 6 is an arcade racer and a notable improvement over the previous Test Drive 5. Though, sadly, that's not saying a lot, as it's not a very good game anyway. It's mediocre at best and only if approached very rarely when you've literally no other racer to play. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with the good, as believe it or not, it's not all bad. The graphics are pretty nice and all famous locales like Paris or Rome have the landmarks of Eiffel Tower and Colosseum present and recognizable, and they add to the atmosphere of racing around exciting and well-known places. There's 40 sports and muscle cars in the game, and they're decently detailed and fun to drive. If you decide to suspend the disbelief because their physics seems to be based on what it was when I was a kid and played on a carpet with model cars. So they slide around the track and behave in a way that's impossible to describe as realistic. But, like I said, if you don't care for it, they're generally speaking fun to zoom around in. The career mode here called Race Main, for whatever the reason, sees you competing in various races, earning money for the spots that you take in them, well, only top 3 really, and then spend it either on upgrades or new cars. Which, adds that sense of progression and some kind of a reason justifying all the racing. So it's pretty cool in its own right. And finally, the tracks feature shortcuts allowing for taking different paths, either to cut down on time or to avoid crowded and difficult in overtaking stretches of the road. There are breakable objects on them too, and these are always fun, even if their existence is totally unnecessary. Now, everything else sucks. The end. I thought it's gonna take me a while, but here you go, I'm done in like a minute with 2 to spare. I should go and grab something to eat and a drink. Or maybe my cat needs a bit of love. Well, I could also, though it's gonna be a bit controversial, carry on talking about Test Drive 6. What do you think I should do? Just in case not to risk it, I'll continue, but I'd like you to know that both my cat and I will suffer dehydration. So, the aforementioned tracks. The game claims that there's over 20 of them, which is a bold statement and a bit deceiving, as many of them I feel are counted both when raced normally and in reverse. And also, some of them are direct ports from Test Drive 4 with nothing changed. It's a bit lazy, but whatever, it is what it is, and not the biggest of the problems that the game has. Now, invisible walls are one, and a big one at that. Not only they should not be in the game at all, but also shouldn't stick out on the track, and yes, there are a couple of spots where they do. They're a pixel or two in size at most, so not something you'll be experiencing often, but whenever it does happen, and you stop in place for no reason, you'll be annoyed as hell. Hell, which is coincidentally where I work daily before I do on these videos. Not a bad place actually, despite what I tell you, it's warm, everyone's mostly nice, and they pay pretty well. Not in money mind you, but with a will to live outside of it and to leave it as soon as possible. It boosts my motivation to get out of there, so yeah, that's hell. Hell aside, real or imaginary, all I've mentioned so far is not everything that the test drive is failing at. The worst thing has easily got to be the computer driver's AI, which actually is kinda fun for the first few races, but then becomes hella annoying for the rest of your playtime. What's wrong with it then, you may wonder? The AI drivers seem not to know of each other's existence, or at least that's how it appears to be. They change lanes or drive into each other's paths as if they didn't see one another and create plenty of collisions in the process. So the "oh my god lol, not again" quickly turns into "oh my god lol, not again." Test Drive 6 is better than 5 and 4, but it's nowhere near the quality of the other races we had on the market already by 1999. There are many who claim that Chris Sawyer was a genius. And while I don't disagree, I've not met him, so I wouldn't want to agree without talking to him either. Also, it would be great to have a chat with someone as important in the history of gaming as he is, just imagine. I think that it goes without saying that he's responsible for some of the most creative and fun gaming experiences ever, provided you like managerial/financial simulation games. I do. And while arguably he's most known for his Transport Tycoon Deluxe, Rollercaster Tycoon is a very fun and captivating title too. It's an amusement park simulation focusing on construction and management of roller coasters in particular. Not only, but they're definitely the main attraction. Imagine Bullfrog's theme park, but with less humor and more realistic and impressive rides. And no wonder, as Mr. Sawyer was no fool, and knew that for the game to be successful, other than the mechanics alone, it would also have to be believable, so he employed assistance from various figures in the real-world theme park industry. And bada beep bada boom, Bob's your uncle, Chris is your game designer, and few months later Rollercaster Tycoon was born. Probably the best amusement park simulation series ever made. The game is a series of underlying numbers running in the background constantly and calculating everything that you see. I mean, most games are just ones and zeros interpreted by a computer's hardware, but what I mean here is that there's a lot of interconnected math there and everything's based on it. So, each of the rides has its own stats, some of them are more exciting, while others are slower and mellower to provide different kinds of experiences. Even decorations around them influence their popularity and how much fun the guests are having. And since we're on the guests, they too are all different and series of walking numbers, because they have their own excitement and nausea tolerance levels, and depending on how these fill up for them, both rides and parks' popularity will rise or fall. Cleanliness is a factor too, and available stalls as well. Park and particular exciting rides can be advertised too, but that requires spare money, so something you initially don't have, so don't expect to do it anytime soon after park opening, as it's more of a mid-game mechanic. A park, like any other recreational business, cannot run on rides and tickets alone, and you need staff to deal with everything around it. So mechanics to maintain and repair the rides when they will eventually break down, security to deal with delinquents and prevent vandalism, and entertainers to keep guests happy when they're waiting in long lines. Rollercoaster Tycoon, same as most other good management simulation games, is a balancing act of making sure that the expenses don't overtake the takings and that the rides will be fun, secure and affordable in the same time, for your park to remain attractive. It's one of the most enjoyable and approachable simulations ever, and a title that many others should copy from when it comes to its learning curve. It introduces everything reasonably fast and in a simple manner, never having you feel overwhelmed or lost. If you enjoy the games in a genre, this one's a masterpiece. King of Dragon Pass is a turn-based fantasy strategy management mixture in which you control a clan of Orlanti living in a fictional land of Glorantha. And your clan is one of the many that recently migrated to the Dragon Pass, a rich, fertile and unexplored valley in search for a new home. You start the game by picking a council of 7 advisors, each responsible for a different part of the clan management, and each will advise you all throughout your adventure. Picking the right folks for the job is a must if you don't want the game to be unnecessarily extra challenging. So, a successful warrior would be a good advisor in terms of warfare, but not necessarily when it comes to diplomacy. In certain circumstances, however, council members can be replaced, when they cause a lot of trouble and are more of a nuisance than help, or when they die or get killed. Anyway, the advices that your council members offer should always be considered but not always implemented, especially that they all may have their own agendas, political and religious views. And most of all, because all decisions have consequences. Big or small, they all may end up in the long run bettering your clan or making it suffer severe repercussions. So, you should carefully think them through and weigh all of the decisions. The game is split into 5 seasons and all of them are considerably different from one another, offering unique challenges and random events. While your most direct and initial goal is to make sure that your clan survives, both the environment and contacts with other tribes, eventually, when you manage to balance everything out and begin to prosper, it will change. You'll need to perform 7 so-called hero quests, so ritual reenactments of feats of the gods, and eventually find a way to unite all clans under your banner, peacefully or with use of force to create a kingdom, and effectively become the titular King of Dragon Pass. But that's not only difficult to achieve, but also something that's not bound to happen for numerous hours. Before you've any chance of doing that, however, you'll need to survive. So you'll be hunting, cultivating the crops, protecting your clan from natural bound hazards like weather, catastrophes, wild animals and the likes, from dangerous creatures like trolls for instance, and other clans that want the valley for themselves only. Gameplay is mainly very static and presented with series of pictures, description of a particular event or problem and set of decisions, you'll need to pick one off. Your tribe may be low on wood, for instance, so an obvious solution would be to make sure to cut down more trees from a nearby forest. This, however, may upset animals or evil creatures living there, sending them directly your way. Or one of your clan members may be acting selfishly and eating more than his fair share, and that should be resolved too. Point is, you'll have few choices to deal with each situation, and all of them will have different short and long-term consequences. Truth be told, more than just a mere strategy with management, King of Dragon Pass has a lot of role-playing mixed in its loop, and it makes it much more enjoyable, as each of your council members, your entire clan, and its individual members alike all respond to your decisions and they influence their lives. Not all of these responses are verbal, however, so observing behavior of your clansmen is a must too. King of Dragon Pass is one of the most unique and entertaining games that don't look like a game at all. It looks like a visual novel, plays kinda like one, but feels like an adventure and a half, or more. Gruntz is a real-time strategy puzzler. Yes, you heard that right, a mix like no other. The titular grunts are goblinoids made of baked clay, and while running away from the natural enemy, the so-called disgruntled, they jumped through the dimension gate to save themselves. While on the other side, they must venture through this new world to gather the missing pieces of the warp stone used to open the dimension gate to return home. That is the plot that your entire gameplay is based on. The levels are for the most part series of mazes filled with traps and switches. First off gotta be avoided and second used all to get to the warp stone piece. There's around 40 of these stages and naturally they are progressively more demanding. They will often feature the aforementioned disgruntled, and while they're deadly, the wide selection of environmental obstacles, switches, pressure plates and teleporters along with over 60 tools and toys will not only let you deal with them, but also be crucial in completing of the stages. And if 60 sounds like a lot, it is, so it's advisable to start your adventure with the training levels, to learn the tropes before you jump into deep water, so to speak. Toys are mainly used for distraction and tools are used in puzzling, and there are weapons too. I'm not gonna explain this last, as anyone who'd ever played the video games know what they're for. There are two gameplay modes in Gruntz. First is Quests, yes, with a Z at the end, and it's what I just described to you. It's similar to Lemmings, but top-down and with all the useful items found along the way. And the second is Battles, also with a Z, and it's a 2-to-4 player multiplayer mode which can be played against others online or bots locally. This one's less about puzzling and more about winning, but equally, if not more fun even. Gruntz is a very difficult game to explain, but in the same time incredibly easy to understand if you give it 10-15 minutes. It's plenty enough time for it to lure you in, and when it does, it will keep you entertained for hours. Until it's or your end, whichever comes first. Demolition Racer has a really cool title and a pretty fun gameplay loop to back it up. And it's like a weird love child spawned from an ungodly relationship between Distraction Derby and a generic multi-event arcade racer. It's a vehicular combat game combining distraction with driving tactics, all on fast tracks or enclosed arenas. There are two gameplay modes in Demolition Racer, Single Race and League Racing. That first is split into 5 sub-modes and honestly, more fun as you decide what and when you get to experience. The second, however, allows you to unlock extra cars, arenas and tracks, so whether you like it or not, you will have to participate in it, and that's also why it's the one that I'll tell you about first. League Racing is racing for the spots. Simple as that. All you want to do is win 4 leagues by placing as high as you can and surviving all of the races. There are 4 track-based leagues and 1 in the arenas. In order to beat the race, you have to place in a particular spot to consider the race beaten and to be able to move to the next one. In the easiest league, 5th spot is good enough, in the next 4th and so on until you need to straight up win in the last one. That pretty much covers the league racing, but we also have single race, which I'm sure you remember is split 5-fold. So the modes are as follows: Demolition, The Chase, Chicken, Last Man Standing, and finally SUICIDE, which sadly given how YouTube works I cannot just straight up say, unless I want this video to be DOA. Anyway, Demolition is a mode in which you have to hit and spin other cars and drive through destructible point boxes for which you collect points, which are then multiplied at the finish line by a multiplier dependent on your position in the race. So being first with no points will not win you the race. The Chase is just that. The race for the position and nothing else. You can still get damaged and damage others, but there's no points for it in this one. The Chicken is identical to the Chase, but you alone are racing in the opposite direction to the other cars. It means that it's much easier to get damaged or slowed down. Or both, if you're me, then definitely both. The Last Man Standing takes place in the arena and not on the track, and it is what you know from Demolition Derby and what its name stipulates. You have to be the last man standing, or more precisely, the last car still driving to win. Shell of a car is fine too, as long as it's you and no one else. And finally, SUICIDE, which is an arena mode too and is the exact opposite of the last man standing. So you must do whatever you can to total your car as fast as possible and preferably before others do the same to their vehicles. It's a real unusual mode and much more fun than it sounds. Demolition Racer is most definitely not the best or most fun game of 1999, but it's hella entertaining for what it is, and a title you will be gladly coming back to every few years or so to dip that toe of yours in a pool of craziness just a little bit, if not all the way in. The Wheel of Time is a first-person shooter with role-playing elements based on Robert Jordan's best-selling fantasy series of books. The Evil, the Scourge, the Dark One has been trapped in an eternal prison and held within by 4 magical seals, for thousands of years no less. 3 of seals are kept by the Aes Sedai Sisterhood after being previously stolen, but 1 is still gone, seemingly stolen by a secret sect worshipping the Dark One that rose within the Aes Sedai without its leadership noticing. Our protagonist Elena Sidia, who's a so-called keeper of the Chronicles of the White Tower, has been elected to the leadership position and entrusted with a mission to recover the lost seal at all cost. The game is composed out of 13 linear missions, during which our protagonist will visit many different places and fight various enemies, chasing the elusive seal. So, you'll face differently armed men, Trollocs, Myrddraals, Mashadar and Machine Shin, and many more. And while these all may sound like something one would shout out mid-high fever, struggling on bed, alternating between being sane and lost in the illness, the names will actually be very familiar to fans of the books. Unlike most shooters, the Wheel of Time does not use weapons. Instead, there are Ter Angreal, magical objects charged with special powers. There's around 40 of these, and they contain numerous offensive and defensive powers like fireballs, lightning strikes, homing missiles, heals, levitation, shields, cloaking and others. All of them can be used for a certain number of times and then replaced by another. There's no ammo in the strict traditional for the FPS meaning in the game. You can carry many of the artifacts with you at the same time, but can only use one at once. They are divided into 9 categories, and picking the right one, especially in the middle of the battle, is hella annoying, as the control scheme for picking spells is cumbersome and not well thought out. While I've seen other FPSs not use traditional weapons, combat in them was usually shoddily implemented, but I gotta say that Wheel of Time tried and succeeded, and is really fun to play and complete, short of that spell switching that is. The graphics and sounds of Wheel of Time are excellent, probably among the best on the market for the time the game released in, and complement the fantasy atmosphere very well, never really feeling out of place or forcefully added. One thing that's a bit disappointing though are the monsters' shouts and grunts, which while of decent quality, repeat all the time and will get on your nerves soon enough. The game also features multiplayer mode with its own thematically appropriate modes of deathmatch and capture the flag, but I've not played them myself and only read good things about them, so perhaps they're as fun as people made them sound. All in all, if you're a fan of fantasy, shooters and the Wheel of Time, it's a no-brainer. In fact, if you like either of the 3, it's still worth a try, but if all of that sounds meh to you, it's perhaps best that you looked into other great games that dropped in 1999. So, wasn't that a pretty good set of games? I think the selections were varied and the games we've covered were all worth at least trying out, if not a full playthrough. What do you think about what was on the show though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.